A woman, beaten and bruised, was dragged off the last stagecoach in the bitter winter. No one knew who she was, where she came from, or what had caused her eyes to have such deep cracks that they looked like they had just escaped from hell. Only one man stood waiting, a quiet rancher living in the Rocky Mountains, who saw her and said only one thing: "Come with me. Have you ever wondered? After the storms of life, what do we really need? A place to run away, or a hand warm enough to make us dare to stand? If you were Amelia, caught between the fear of being hunted and a strange man with peaceful eyes, what would you choose? Continue running until you are exhausted, or stop to open up another chance of life, however fragile, however risky? Try to put yourself in that moment and feel. What would your heart say? I invite you to embark on a journey of healing that is painful, yet breathtakingly beautiful. If you find it meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel to continue this story with me. That afternoon, Red Creek was shrouded in a cold mist as thin as the veil of old winter. Nearly 4 inches of snow covered the familiar red Wyoming dirt roads. The wind blew as long as the weary breaths of the men in this town, still living slowly, still living steadily, living on what remained of their trying years. The bells of the old stagecoach rang out heavily. The wheels scraped on the thin ice, making a sound like rotten wood groaning. The last train of the day had just arrived, and the people of Red Creek only glanced at it, not really paying it any attention, partly because they were used to travelers passing by, and partly because winter made people reserved, keeping their warmth to themselves. But when the car door opened, the whole town seemed to stop for a moment. A woman got out. She was so thin that a strong wind could blow her away. Her ashen cloak was torn at the shoulders, the edges frayed as if it had spent days being whipped against rocks and mud. Her face was purple, and the ugly bruises were even more evident in the pale light of the winter afternoon. One cheek was swollen, her lips were chapped, and her hands trembled as she clung to the iron bars of the cart. Pedestrians moved aside. No one spoke, but their eyes held an instinctive wariness. In the West, a wounded woman stepping off a strange vehicle meant trouble. Everyone knew that, and everyone chose to stay away. Amelia Hart knew all those looks. She was used to being judged, to being scrutinized, to being looked at as if she were a sign of disaster. But today, her legs could barely keep her steady. The inn's fireplace just ahead radiated warmth, but she dared not step inside. She didn't know if she would have the courage to ask for help again. Then a low voice rang out from behind, not loud, not hurried, but decisive as a hammer pounding the misty ground. "You're coming with me." Amelia turned, startled. She saw a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the stocky build of a man who had worked on a farm all his life. His dark brown leather jacket was dusted with snow, and a wide-brimmed hat hid most of his face, leaving only his ashen eyes, as sharp as a knife sharpened by years. Rhett Lawson, a name familiar to everyone in Red Creek, but unfamiliar to Amelia. He did not look at her with pity, nor with curiosity. There was only one thing in his eyes, the calm silence of someone who had seen so much pain that nothing surprised him. Amelia took an instinctive step back. Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, as if sunburned from the long walk. Rhett did not answer at once. He stepped closer, gently, but enough to let others know he had no intention of giving up halfway. "You can't stand any longer," he said, his voice part observation, part gentle command. Amelia wanted to protest. She wanted to say she was fine, to sound strong, to prove she wasn't some discarded object to be disposed of. But as she opened her mouth, her body swayed. He quickly reached out a strong arm to steady her. In that moment, Amelia was so scared she almost cried. Not from the pain, but from the unexpected kindness that had stripped away the defenses she had held together for so many years. Rhett saw that, but he said nothing more. He just turned to the landlady standing on the porch. "I'll take her to Lawson Ridge. Get some warm towels and hot water for me." Mrs. Martha Jenkins held the shawl in her hand, but did not come forward immediately. She looked furtively at Amelia with a look of anxiety and suspicion, as if she knew something was haunting the poor woman. She whispered to Rhett, "Are you sure I hear there are strangers prowling about these parts?" Rhett just nodded. "She needs a safe place right now. I can do it." Amelia looked up at him again. Somehow, his voice calmed her heart a little. It was as if he wasn't trying to be kind or heroic, just doing what needed to be done. As Rhett helped her into the old wagon parked near the stables, Amelia gripped the edge of the seat with all her remaining strength. She looked back at the town, the old wooden houses, the porches with flickering oil lamps, the people turning away as if her presence were nothing more than a cold gust of wind. But a strange question arose in her heart. Could she still trust anyone, or even believe that she was worthy of being saved? The carriage began to roll down the road leading out of town, the hooves clicking steadily. Amelia sat against the side of the carriage, her body aching, but her heart conflicted. She was afraid, but at the same time, somewhere in that fear, there was a small ray of light, like a flickering fire in the deepest winter night. Rhett didn't turn to look at her, but he said softly, "Enough so the wind wouldn't carry him away. It's a long way, but it'll be warmer when we get home." Amelia clasped her trembling hands. "Home," she whispered, both hopeful and hesitant. The winter wind blew through, carrying with it the pain and confusion that still clung to her body. But for the first time in months, Amelia felt like she had not been completely abandoned by the world. And so, the journey of two lonely people begins slowly, quietly, but full of emotional fragments that even they themselves did not expect to exist. Rhett Lawson's wagon pulled out of Red Creek's town square as the afternoon sun faded. The last rays of light cast a pale yellow glow on the snow-covered road, like the flame of a dying oil lamp. Amelia Hart sat on the edge of the wagon bed, her hands clasped together to keep the warmth from drifting away with the wind. The wooden wheels rolled on the thin ice with a steady sound, making Amelia's heartbeat match the rhythm of the movement. She had no idea where she was going, or if the future awaited her, or if it was just another escape. But she could feel one thing: her body was slowly giving out, and if it weren't for the wagon, she would have collapsed in the middle of the road long ago. Rhett sat in front, holding the reins with calloused hands. He was strong and straight, like an old oak standing firm in a snowstorm. He said nothing for more than a mile. The silence was strangely unsettling to Amelia. It was like a loose cloak, enveloping her from the scrutiny she often received from strangers. She looked at his back, hesitated for a moment, then spoke. Her voice was so small and weak that it surprised even herself. I can explain what happened earlier." Rhett didn't turn around. He just gave her a soft, almost grunt, as if to tell her to continue if she wanted. "I am not the one causing trouble. I just ran into trouble along the way." Amelia's words hung in the air. Rhett still didn't respond, not because he was indifferent, but because he wanted her to say what she was truly ready to say. Westerners knew the truth should never be brought out while a person was still breathing after a panic attack. Amelia looked down at her shabby old shoes, tossed along the long journey east. Every time she mistook her breath for the wind, the memory of the man who had tormented her emerged like darkness swallowing all light. She was afraid Rhett knew too much, afraid that if he knew Caleb Thorne was after her, he would abandon her as he had all the others. "You don't need to take me anywhere," she said softly, as if trying to hide her weakness. "I can find shelter, or go back to town." Rhett still did not turn. His voice was calm, without coaxing or forcing. "You cannot stay at Red Creek after sundown. Strangers will be asked questions, and you will not have the strength to stand if anyone begins to suspect. A gust of wind blew, making Amelia shiver. She pulled her cloak closer around her neck, but the cold still seeped through the tears. Rhett saw it. He reached for a woolen blanket from behind the chair and held it out to her. "Put it on. It's even colder." Amelia took the blanket, the warmth spreading through her palms, making her heart clench. A simple kindness, but powerful enough to make one choke. The carriage wound through a low pine forest, where dark tree trunks cast shadows against the snow. In the distance, the sun was sinking behind the mountains. The sky was a red-orange, then a blue-purple, like a hastily drawn picture in the biting cold. Amelia raised her head to look at the scenery spreading out before her, then asked softly, "Where are you taking me?" "To Lawson Ridge," Rhett said quickly. "That's your farm, right?" His reticence made Amelia feel both embarrassed and relieved. She didn't have to think about how to respond, didn't have to guess what he was thinking. There were no prying questions or judgments, just the feeling that he was letting her decide how much she wanted to open up. After a while, she spoke again, her voice as small as the wind. "I don't want to bother you. I'm running away. So if it's going to cause you any trouble, I can leave as soon as I get there." This time Rhett turned, only half a face, but enough for Amelia to see his deep gray eyes. "If you were causing trouble, I wouldn't be taking you." The clattering of hooves slowed as he continued, "But you're clearly not the one causing trouble. You're just someone who's having trouble from someone else." The words made Amelia's chest tighten. She looked down to hide the tears that clung to her eyes, not because of the pain, but because it was rare for anyone to see through her fear without hurting her more. Rhett didn't touch her, didn't try to offer more comfort. He let her be in the silence of her feelings, as someone who knew loss and panic would. That silence, again, made Amelia feel safe. The carriage went on a few miles before the sky began to darken. The first stars appeared, pale but brave. Amelia looked up at them for a few seconds, then closed her heavy eyes. In that moment, she remembered the sleepless nights, the footsteps of the pursuer, the cold breath of fear. She had run, had clung to the last slim chance of escaping her old life by signing up as a mail-order bride. But now, sitting in a stranger's wagon, she didn't know if she was on the right track or just pushing herself to a more dangerous turn. Rhett held the reins tighter as the wagon began to climb the hill toward the farmhouse. The light from his porch lamp was beginning to appear like a small sliver of light in the darkness. The warmth, strangely enough, heightened Amelia's fear. Because sometimes, people get so used to the darkness that the light hurts. She clutched the blanket tightly in her hands and whispered as if to herself, "I don't know how much longer I can stay." Rhett replied in a low, steady voice, not loud, but enough to melt the ice that surrounded her heart. "You stay as long as you want. No one will force you to choose something you don't want to." That sentence, simple yet heavy as an oath, made Amelia feel something very small but very real. She had just started a new journey, a journey that perhaps, for the first time after so much pain, she did not have to go alone. Rhett Lawson's wagon pulled up to the large wooden gate as night fell. The moon was half hidden by clouds, casting a pale silver glow on the long fence posts that ran along the hillside. Lawson Ridge Ranch appeared with that quintessential Western silence, vast, raw, and silent, as if the world were holding its peace so as not to awaken something that had been asleep for too long. Amelia Hart sat up, shivering slightly from the cold wind. She pulled the blanket closer and looked around. Before her was a 2-story wooden house, its dark brown sloping roof faded with time. The oil lamplight from the downstairs window was a warm, soft yellow, like the breath of a house that had never lost hope despite many winters. Rhett stepped down first, checked the reins, and offered Amelia his hand. She hesitated. Every time someone reached out, she was tempted to recoil. a reflex of someone who had been hurt too much, but Rhett's gaze was unmistakable. He stood there patiently, like a great tree that never rushed, waiting for her to find her balance. Finally, Amelia touched his hand lightly. His hand was warm, rough, but steady. With his support, she stepped onto the ground. The moment her feet touched the snow, the cold seemed to rush straight up her spine, making her shiver. "Come on. The house is just up ahead," Rhett said, his voice barely audible. The wooden porch door opened as they approached. Mrs. Lucille Lawson, Rhett's grandmother, stood on the porch, holding an oil lamp. She was a woman in her 70s, small in stature, but with eyes brighter and sharper than many young people. In the lamplight, her face showed the calmness typical of a Westerner who had seen many changes. She watched Amelia for a long moment. No judgment, no fear, just understanding and a little sadness, as if she had seen this story from somewhere in her own memory. "Come in. It's cold and not good for someone who is weak," she said, and stepped back inside. Amelia nodded her thanks and followed Rhett into the house. As soon as the door closed, the warmth from the fireplace filled the room, driving away the chill that had gripped her lungs. The smell of burning pine mixed with the lingering scent of bread from dinner made Amelia's throat tighten. The simple scent evoked memories of home, of warm dinners she had long lost. She looked around the room, a large wooden table in the middle of the kitchen, a few old chairs, low bookshelves covered in dust, and a small photograph placed in the corner of the fireplace. It was a photo of a woman smiling gently. Her face was beautiful in the rustic Western style. Her eyes were gentle but deep. Amelia looked at the photo a beat longer. She knew who the woman was without needing to be told. Rhett noticed her gaze. He walked over, took a warm towel, and placed it on Amelia's shoulders before speaking in a low, calm voice. "My wife, 7 years gone." Amelia didn't ask any more, but her silence was understanding, not prying or inadvertently prying into someone else's pain. Rhett noticed, a little, but his breath eased. "Mrs." Lucille put the kettle on the table. "Let her rest. Rhett, the girl is exhausted." Rhett nodded. He turned to Amelia. "You'll have the back room, near the stairs. It's warmer there." Amelia wanted to say thank you, but her throat tightened. She had never received such kindness since arriving on this land. No conditions, no doubts, no forced questions. It made her so confused that she was afraid she would burst into tears in the middle of the room. Rhett led her upstairs. As Amelia walked down the hallway, she noticed several framed photographs hanging on the walls. They were all idyllic scenes from the ranch cows grazing, fields of golden autumn grass, and a picture of a young Rhett standing next to his wife. They both had a peaceful look on their faces. Amelia lingered on that photo the longest. Not because of jealousy or comparison, but because she saw something in Rhett's eyes then that was gone. Now the lightness of someone who had never been overwhelmed by loss. Rhett opened the door. "You can rest here. There's hot water in the kettle. Call if you need anything." Amelia bowed slightly. "Thank you. I am truly grateful." Rhett did not reply to the thank you. Westerners were not used to such words, and he was certainly not. He merely nodded and walked away, alone in the small room. Amelia let herself fall onto the bed. The mattress was old but clean. The sheets and pillows smelled of sunshine, a feeling she had long forgotten. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and suddenly tears welled up. Not because of physical pain, not because of fear anymore. She cried because for the first time in months, she felt like she was in a place safe enough to let go. But as the tears rolled down her cheeks, the memory of Caleb Thorne came flooding back. His face, his voice, his hands. The fear wouldn't go away so easily. She jumped up, hugging her knees. Am I bringing trouble to them? The thought clung to her like a long, unwavering shadow. Downstairs. Rhett stood by the fireplace, his hand resting on a photograph of his wife. Lucille came to his side, looking at him with the patient eyes of an old man who understood more than words could say. "She was as scared as a deer," she said softly, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't quite extinguished. Rhett was silent. He looked at the fire in the hearth. The reflection of the flames in his eyes revealed a deep but steady sadness, like a lake after a wind. "I know," he replied softly, "and I know I shouldn't have left her alone tonight." Lucille put her hand on his arm. "No one in this house leaves a weakling alone. Rhett, you know that better than anyone." Outside. The night wind crept across the meadow, whispering against the old wooden walls in a long, lingering whisper. Upstairs. Amelia hugged her blanket tightly. Downstairs. Rhett stood silently by the fireplace. There was only the sound of wind, of fire, and of two hearts accustomed to loss, but never without hope. The first morning at Lawson Ridge Ranch began with a pale straw light, filtering through the windows and falling softly on the thick blanket wrapped around Amelia Hart. She opened her eyes slowly, as if the previous night's sleep still wanted to hold her. It was the first time in months that she slept soundly, without dreaming of the darkness chasing her. The small room still held the warmth from the night fire, making her feel lighter and more comfortable. As she sat up, the light illuminated the bruises on her neck and shoulders, making them stand out against her pale skin. She turned slightly, feeling the dull pain from the blow she tried to forget. Amelia stepped onto the cold wooden floor, fixed her hair, and walked to the small table where she had left her old duffel bag. She had been so exhausted last night that she had missed checking her luggage. Now, when she opened the bag, she saw something she both hated and feared, a man's silver ring, twisted and bent in the twisted shape of years of struggle. 3 characters were engraved on the inside. C.T. Amelia inhaled sharply, her hands shaking. Buried memories surged up like cold gusts of wind into her heart. She clenched the ring and let it go as if touching it might burn her. Just then, there was a soft knock on the door. Rhett Lawson's deep voice came from outside. "Are you awake, Amelia?" She quickly stuffed the ring into her pocket before replying, "Yes, I'm awake." The door was ajar. Rhett leaned against the frame, holding a steaming mug of tea. His profile, cast by the light, looked sturdy yet gentle, like a mountain that had stood there for centuries, strong enough to block the wind but not repel anyone seeking shelter. "I brought tea. This will make your breathing easier on this cold morning." He set the cup down on the table, avoiding looking too closely at her injuries so as not to embarrass her. Amelia took it, her hand brushing against his rough leather sleeve. She wanted to say thank you, but the word caught in her throat. She only nodded, forcing a small smile. Rhett returned the nod, but his eyes were thoughtful. "After you finish your drink, go down to the kitchen. Grandma's cooking breakfast. There's cornbread and oatmeal," Rhett said, turning away. Amelia waited until his footsteps faded before letting out a deep breath. She reached into her pocket where the ring lay. Fear gripped her, keeping her still for several minutes. If Rhett saw this ring, if he recognized that symbol, if he knew Caleb Thorne was after her. She clutched the edge of her shirt tightly. Her heart felt like it was being held in someone's hand. The aroma of cornbread wafted from the kitchen. When she walked quietly down the stairs, Mrs. Lucille Lawson was setting breakfast on the table. She looked at Amelia kindly. "Can you eat something? Your face is pale." "Yes, I can eat," Amelia answered softly, trying to smile, but her eyes showed confusion. Rhett was standing by the window, checking his coat before going out. He glanced at her briefly, as if to make sure she was okay. Amelia sat down. The warm, simple, family-like breakfast made her feel like she was in someone else's life, a life too peaceful for someone like her. As soon as the meal was over, Rhett spoke up. "I'm going to the stables for a bit. If you want to walk around the farm, go ahead. Just keep warm." Amelia wanted to say that she needed some quiet, but in truth, she didn't want to be alone with the memories that were haunting her. "So," she said, "let me help you for a bit. I don't like standing still for too long." Rhett looked a little surprised, but then nodded. "Okay." They stepped out into the yard together, their breaths drifting in the cold air in small clouds. Amelia looked out at Lawson Ridge in the morning light, the horses grazing leisurely, the barn roof covered with a thin layer of snow, and in the distance a line of pine trees nearly 40 feet tall, forming a stunning wall of dark green. "It's beautiful," Amelia said softly. Rhett only responded with a low sound. "It's always beautiful here." The large barn was made of old pine. Inside, the steady creaking of horses echoed. Rhett opened the door. Amelia followed. The cold air rushed in, but the smell of hay was comforting. Rhett bent over in a corner of the barn, where he was picking up the scattered belongings from the previous evening. He was about to pick up a cloth bag when his hand touched a small object lying on the ground, a silver ring, dented, and inside were engraved 2 letters very clearly. C.T. Rhett picked it up. For a moment, Amelia felt her blood run cold. She stood still, eyes wide, her secret hand in her pocket clutching the other ring. Rhett turned the ring in his palm. His manner was unhurried, unsuspecting, but his eyes darkened a little. He knew that kind of engraving. The West was not a large place, and men who engraved their names on things tended to be possessive. He looked up at Amelia. "This," Rhett said slowly, "is it yours?" The moment seemed like a lifetime. Amelia wanted to lie, wanted to say she didn't know, wanted to say something, but she found she didn't have the breath to say anything. Rhett saw the tension in her eyes. He didn't come closer, didn't press. He just kept a safe distance, as if afraid any hurried step would set her off. "If you don't want to talk now," he continued, "you don't have to." Amelia froze. That calm, that endurance, the dignity in that voice, all of which weakened her in a very different way. Rhett set the ring on a wooden shelf beside the stable. "I just need to know one thing." He looked her straight in the eyes. "Is anyone out there looking for you?" A strong wind blew through, making the barn door rattle slightly. Amelia clenched her hands so hard her fingernails dug into her skin. She answered softly, but her voice seemed to pierce the large cage. "Yes." Rhett nodded, showing no sign of fear. "Then we'll be more careful from today." That was it. No further questions. No pressing for his name. No questioning why. And that made Amelia want to cry more than any kindness in the world. They stepped out of the stables. As the sunlight hit her face, Amelia suddenly understood that this silent man had given her more than just a home. He gave her the right to breathe, and maybe that alone was enough to save a broken person. The afternoon at Lawson Ridge Ranch passed in that warm, golden light typical of the West, as the sun began to tilt over the distant mountains, leaving a soft orange streak across the sky. Amelia Hart sat on the front porch, her hands wrapped around the iron mug of herbal tea that Lucille had brewed. The scent of mint wafted gently, mixed with the scent of burnt wood and earth after snow, and she felt a rare tremor of peace in her heart. Rhett Lawson was near the stables, examining the gate and the old saddle. His large figure in his brown leather jacket stood in the afternoon light like a part of the land, steady, silent, and unshakable. Amelia watched him from afar, unable to understand the feeling in her heart. A man so quiet that sometimes she thought he couldn't hear, but his presence was so strong that just standing there with him made her feel less afraid. She took a deep breath and turned back to look at the warm house behind her. "Mrs." Lucille was preparing dinner, the rhythmic clanging of pots and pans. The atmosphere inside was filled with a simplicity Amelia thought she would never experience again. As the sun sank completely behind the mountain, Rhett closed the stable gate and walked to the porch. He brushed the snow off his shoulders, then paused for a second when he saw Amelia sitting there, her eyes distant. "Are you cold?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I was just looking at the evening view." "It's so beautiful here," Rhett replied curtly. "Yes." But the yes was a quiet agreement, without any flowery words. He entered the house first, leaving the door open for Amelia after Mrs. Lucille called the two of them in for dinner. The small kitchen was ablaze with oil lamps. Lucille had set a steaming pot of stew on the table, next to a pan of golden cornbread and slices of fried bacon. The aroma made Amelia's stomach clench. She hesitated, wondering whether to help or just sit down. "Sit down, my child, and leave everything to me." "Mrs." Lucille patted her hand. Her voice was like a soft blanket over Amelia's frightened heart. They sat around a large, weathered wooden table. The firelight danced on the plates. Rhett ate little, but slowly and thoughtfully. Amelia ate cautiously, afraid of doing something wrong. Lucille told stories of Red Creek as she ate. Last week, Mr. Hudson was thrown off his feet by the most stubborn horse in the stable. "Luckily, he didn't break any bones," she said, laughing lightly. "Western men are strong like that. They fall down, get up again, curse a few times, and then they're back to normal." Amelia chuckled. Her laugh was light as a breeze, but enough to warm the air in the room. Rhett looked at her for a second. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened, as if he'd just seen something that should have been there all along. During the meal, Amelia unconsciously raised her hand to touch her neck, where there was still a bruise. Mrs. Lucille immediately noticed, but did not ask anything. She only said a small sentence, as light as a falling leaf. "Take your time. This house does not force anyone to say something they are not ready to say." Amelia choked on the words. She bowed her head, tears welling up in her eyes but not falling. The dinner continued in a warm atmosphere. The soft clinking of knives and forks, the crackling of the firewood, the whistling of the wind outside, all combined to create the human music that Amelia had thought she had lost. After the meal was over, Rhett stood up to clear away a few dishes. Amelia hurriedly said, "Let me do it. I'm used to doing housework." He looked at her for a moment. "You're a guest." But Amelia shook her head. "I don't want to just sit around. I feel guilty." Rhett didn't argue. He nodded and let her help Mrs. Lucille wash the dishes and wipe the table. These little things helped Amelia feel less lost in such a strange place. Like touching the damp washcloth, touching the old wooden table. She was touching reality, a reality that didn't beat her, didn't confine her, didn't chase her. When he was done, Rhett picked up his coat from the hook near the door. "I'll go check the east gate. It's windy today. Maybe the hinges are out of place." He looked at Amelia. "Get some rest. Don't worry about anything." Amelia stood near the fireplace, her hands reaching toward the warm flames. She watched him put on his coat and hat and step out into the dim light. The door closed, leaving a soft silence. "Mrs." Lucille came over and put her hand on Amelia's back. "Don't worry about him. He's a good boy, but he's been introverted for too long." Amelia glanced at her and asked softly, "Did he lose someone important?" Mrs. Lucille nodded. "His wife. Kind, gentle. Loved this farm as her own breath. Died of pneumonia in the worst of winter." Rhett spoke less, smiled less, but he wasn't cruel. He just closed his heart so he wouldn't hurt again. Amelia's heart sank as she listened. A man who kept quiet to survive. Just like her. Mrs. Lucille looked at her for a long time and then continued, "Sleep well tonight. No one here will hurt you. As Amelia climbed the stairs, the smell of old wood wafted in her footsteps. She entered her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed. She opened her pocket and took out the dented ring. The light from the hallway made the letter CT stand out like a warning. She turned the ring between her fingers. Each turn brought a painful memory she wasn't ready to face. Rhett didn't ask any more questions, but the afternoon's question lingered in her mind. Is anyone out there looking for you? She knew she couldn't hide forever. Caleb Thorne wouldn't give up. And sooner or later, that darkness would find its way to Lawson Ridge if Amelia were here. But in her heart, another thought crept in, small but clear. This was the first time in so long. She felt like she belonged somewhere in the world. A dinner, a house, a man who doesn't ask too many questions, a kind, understanding old woman. It was like a gentle squeeze on her deepest wound, not to make it hurt more, but just to remind her that life can still be kind. Amelia tightened her grip on the ring. Closing her eyes, she knew she had a choice to make. Run so she wouldn't hurt anyone, or stay and face her fear for the first time. Outside, a cold wind blew across the roof, and from a distance came the sound of heavy footsteps returning to the porch. The footsteps of a man unaware that the darkness was drawing closer by the hour. The next morning a thin layer of snow fell, covering the roof, the stables, and the trails around Lawson Ridge Ranch. The air was sharper and colder, and Amelia Hart's breath turned to mist. She stood at her window, looking out at the white expanse. Her eyes were still dark from lack of sleep, her mind drifting between a fragile sense of security and a growing anxiety. She had tried to read Rhett Lawson's face last night, trying to guess if he recognized the initials on the ring. She was afraid he would suspect her, but at the same time, she was afraid he wouldn't be careful enough to protect himself from the danger that lurked. When she walked down to the kitchen, the smell of roasting coffee filled the room. Rhett stood near the fireplace, a cup in his hand, his thick leather jacket draped over his shoulders as usual. The light from the window fell on his face, highlighting his square jaw and the slight frown that always appeared when he was deep in thought. Amelia asked softly. "You're up so early?" Rhett set his cup down on the table, his voice low. "Something happened in Red Creek. I need to stop by Martha's Tavern to ask a few questions." Amelia paused. "About me?" Rhett neither denied nor confirmed. "You'll be safe here. Close the north window today. The wind is strong." Amelia wanted to ask more, but Lucille came in with a towel in her hand. "Eat something before you worry about grown-up things," she said in a half-serious, half-teasing tone, which Amelia did not want to make the atmosphere more tense. Rhett put on his coat and hat and went out the door. Before he left, he turned back and said, "I'll be back before dark." No long words, no explanation. But that short sentence made Amelia feel something deeper than mere concern. As the sound of hooves faded away, Amelia realized she had been standing still on the doorstep for a long time, watching the large figure on the black horse disappear into the snow. She did not understand the feeling, only that a vague anxiety was creeping into her every nerve. While Amelia helped Mrs. Lucille clean up the kitchen, she said knowingly, she went to ask about that ring. Amelia almost dropped the bowl she was holding. "You? No, my dear." She placed her hand on the back of hers, warm and calm. "I have lived this long. There is nothing my eyes cannot see, but I will not force you. Everyone here has a past." Amelia bit her lip. "I don't want anyone to be in danger because of me." "Mrs." Lucille sighed. "Western men have their own ways. Rhett is not the type to leave a woman to her own devices, nor is he the type to run away when he hears of trouble." Amelia was silent. The words were both a comfort and a burden. She didn't know if she should stay or leave before things got out of hand. While Amelia wrestled with her thoughts, Rhett Lawson rode into the town of Red Creek. A thin layer of snow covered his wide-brimmed hat as he dismounted and tied the reins in front of Martha Bloom's tavern, a place filled with laughter, fiddle music, and the chatter of passers-by. The tavern was quieter than usual. Two men sat far apart, drinking the hot corn wine that was typical of the region. Martha was wiping down the bar. When Rhett entered, she looked up, her sharp eyes under her graying hair seeming to understand everything before he spoke. "Don't tell me the Lawsons need anything?" Martha smiled slightly, but when she saw Rhett's gloomy face, her smile faded. He stood up straight instead of sitting. "I need to know what's going on the west side. Have there been any strange people around?" Martha put down the handkerchief. "Yes. Stranger. Aggressive. Asking about a young girl. Didn't give his name. Didn't reveal his motive. But he had the look of a predator." Rhett stood still as a statue. What was so special about that man? "Yes," Martha said, her voice lower. "He wore a ring with the letters CT engraved on it." Rhett clenched his fists. "Are you sure, Rhett? I've lived in Red Creek for 40 years. I know that kind of person." Martha stepped closer. "What's going on?" "That girl is at your house." Rhett didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes told Martha everything. She sighed, her voice worried. "Do you know what he asked?" "He asked if anyone saw a girl beaten up, running this way. He said she owed him an unforgivable debt." Rhett drew in a cold breath. Anger flared in his chest, but it was not loud. It was deep and quiet, like the cracking of the earth beneath his feet. He put the money on the counter and said, "If he comes back, don't say anything. Don't mention Amelia Hart's name." Martha nodded vigorously. "You know I will protect it to the end." Rhett turned to leave the tavern, but before he opened the door, Martha called back Rhett. He paused. Martha spoke slowly, each word heavy. "Be careful with that man. He is not like your average troublemaker. He has the way of talking of someone who is used to trampling on people." Rhett didn't answer. He just nodded slightly and left. As he stepped out into the street, the snowy wind whipped the flaps of his coat. He tightened the reins, mounted his horse, and spurred it toward Lawson Ridge. Each hoof of the horse's hooves was as loud as the pounding of his heart. On the way back, Rhett could only think of one thing: Amelia Hart was in real danger, and he was getting closer than ever. Amelia, meanwhile, was standing by the window, watching the snow fall, unaware that a familiar cruel shadow had appeared in the town a few miles away. She put her hand to her pocket where the misshapen ring lay. Every time she touched it, she felt the darkness creep a little closer, and the distance between Lawson Ridge and Caleb Thorne was closing very quickly. The afternoon wind whipped through Red Creek Valley harder than usual, carrying a chill that made the wooden planks on the Lawson Ridge Ranch porch tremble. Amelia Hart stood in the kitchen, her hands wet from washing dishes, her eyes occasionally glancing out the window. Every time the wind howled or snow pounded against the glass, her heart skipped a beat as if she had heard footsteps. Rhett Lawson had left that morning, and though he had said he would be back before dark, Amelia felt uneasy. Something in the air today sent a chill down her spine, as if an invisible cord were pulling tightly around her breasts. "Mrs." Lucille Lawson looked back at Amelia as she piled more logs on the fire. "Sit down here for a minute. You're making me dizzy with all that walking." Amelia smiled wryly. "I'm sorry. I'm just worried. Rhett knows his way around better than a map. Don't worry about the roads." But that didn't ease Amelia's unease. Mrs. Lucille knew it. She sat down across from Amelia, her old but clear eyes fixed on her. "You're hiding something important, aren't you?" Amelia bowed her head. Her fingertips trembled slightly on the table. "I don't know where to start." "Then start where you fear least," she said softly. "Here, no one will use your pain against you. That simple sentence hit Amelia hard on the defenses. She had long since stopped trusting anyone. Not trusting kindness. Not trusting human hearts. Not trusting any arms extended without a purpose. But for the first time, she wanted to say something to stop feeling like a wandering shadow. She clenched her fingers. Someone wants me, and he won't stop. Mrs. Lucille didn't ask for a name, didn't ask why. She just put her hand on the back of Amelia's cold hand. You're not alone in this. As Amelia was about to say more, the sound of powerful hooves rang out in the distance. She jumped to her feet and ran out onto the porch. Dusting snow rose in time with the horse's hooves, and then the silhouette of Rhett Lawson appeared around the corner. Amelia sighed, her shoulders slumping with relief. But as Rhett approached, his eyes sent a chill down her spine. Not anger, not panic, but the look of someone measuring danger. Rhett dismounted, his feet crunching in the snow. He took off his cap, brushed the snow from his shoulders, and looked at Amelia for a long moment. She felt her breath catch. "Did you meet someone?" she asked softly. Rhett did not answer at once. He looked around, his eyes scanning the fence, the windows, the pine woods beyond, as if checking for any sign of someone. "Come inside," he said in a low, steady voice. "You two go inside." As the wooden door closed, Amelia could hear the wind whistling through the cracks, as if signaling something ominous. "Rhett, what's wrong?" asked Mrs. Lucille. He took off his gloves, hung his coat on a hook, and walked straight into the kitchen. The light highlighted the tension on his face. "I'm talking to Martha Bloom. There's been a strange man in the tavern for the past 2 days." Amelia sat down immediately, a chill running down her spine. Rhett continued. He asked about a young girl. He described her being beaten up, running toward Red Creek. He said she owed him an unforgivable debt. Amelia's face paled. "Mrs." Lucille put her hand on her shoulder, holding her as if she were a leaf trembling in the wind. Rhett looked at her. "Do you know who he is?" The question was no longer a question. It was a statement. Amelia pursed her lips, her eyes filling with tears. She knew it was time. "His name is Caleb Thorne." The name fell from her lips like a torn wound. Rhett closed his eyes for a second. "Seat?" She nodded. "He was the one who bought me. He made me a mail-order bride to take to his farm. But after he brought me home, he became a different person. Violent, cruel. I don't know what he hated about me. I just know that every time he got angry, I lost a part of myself. Whether it was tears rolling down her cheeks or the reflection of the fire in the fireplace making her eyes red, no one could tell. Rhett moved closer but kept his distance so she wouldn't feel pressured. "How long has he been doing this?" "Almost a year," Amelia replied, her voice hoarse with pain. "But the last 6 months, he hasn't seen me as a person. I ran away when he was drunk and left my keys behind. I thought I could hide forever." The air in the room thickened. Even the sound of the wind outside seemed to recede into the background. Rhett sat down in front of Amelia, looking straight into her tear-filled eyes. "You're here, and you're not running any further." Amelia's eyes widened. "But if he finds his way here, you and Grandma will be in danger." "I can't." "You can't try to protect others when you're shaking yourself," Rhett said in a stern but not harsh voice. "You're not harming anyone by seeking shelter. He's the one who's harming them, not you." Amelia looked down at her hands. "I'm scared. He'll do terrible things to anyone who gets involved with me." "Mrs." Lucille interrupted, her voice stronger than usual. "Child, this family has faced loss. A man like him does not frighten us." Rhett stood up and went to the window to look out. "There are footprints near the west fence. Not mine or Grandma's." Amelia was so stunned that her hands gripped the edge of the table to keep herself from falling. "Is he getting closer?" Rhett did not turn. It might be him. it might be someone else. But I won't wait for him to come to the door to prove it. He took the shotgun from the wooden cabinet, checking each bullet. His movements were slow but sure, every gesture showing that he was used to defending this land. Amelia trembled, not because of the gun, but because she had never seen anyone stand so strongly on her side. Rhett continued, his voice low and clear in the room. I'll be on the porch tonight. All the doors and windows are closed. The fireplace keeps me warm. You two go to bed early. Amelia jumped up. No, you don't have to do that for me. Rhett turned. His eyes were not angry, not annoyed, just unmistakable frankness. Not because of you. This is my home. Anyone who comes here with the intention of harming anyone must go through me. The words burned like a fire in the hearth and went straight to Amelia's chest. In that moment, she knew there was no turning back. Because here, there are people who see her as a human being, and because of that, she saw tears fall without fearing them anymore. Night fell quickly after that, darker and colder than usual. Amelia sat by her window, looking down at the porch where Rhett Lawson sat leaning against a wooden post, his gun across his lap, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness. She placed her hand on the cold glass, her heart heavy, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of light, just a small ray, but enough to dispel the darkness that Caleb Thorne had cast into her life for a long year. There was always a quietness in the West at night, not absolute silence, but a silence woven by wind, by insects, and by the vast distances between hills. But tonight, Amelia Hart felt the silence differently, thicker, heavier, as if the darkness itself were holding its breath, watching every movement in the cabin. Amelia stood by her window, her eyes following the familiar figure of Rhett Lawson under the porch. He was sitting with his back against a wooden post, a shotgun across his lap. The oil lamp hanging on the porch wall cast a pale yellow light on his face, highlighting the strong yet tired features of a man who had stayed up many nights just to protect what he still had. Amelia's breath misted against the cold glass. She knew his night watch was not just for the safety of the house, but for her as well. It made her feel both warm and guilty. If it weren't for her, none of this would have happened. If it weren't for her, Rhett wouldn't have had to stay up all night with a gun. If it weren't for her, a man like Caleb Thorne would never have set foot in this land. She rested her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. Outside, a light snow was falling, creating a white blanket that covered most of the yard. The scene looked peaceful, but the peace made Amelia even more nervous, because Caleb always chooses the quietest moment to attack. A small noise suddenly sounded from behind the house. Amelia opened her eyes, startled so hard her chest hurt. She leaned toward the glass, trying to see through the darkness. There was nothing but scattered tree shadows and long streaks of snow. But she knew the sound was not caused by the wind. Rhett heard too. He turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes scanning across the porch toward the back corner of the fence. One hand tightened on the gun, but he did not move. He watched, silent, his body taut as a bowstring. Amelia couldn't stand still. She ran down the stairs, her legs shaking with fear and anxiety. When she opened the back door, the cold wind hit her face and she wanted to cry. Rhett turned when he saw her step onto the porch. "Come inside. I told you you don't have to." "Is anyone out there?" she asked, her voice trembling, but her eyes strangely determined. Rhett looked at her for a few seconds before answering. "There was a noise, but not sure." She took a deep breath. "I don't want to hide in my room when it comes to me." Rhett tilted his head, studying her as if he were assessing the readiness of someone who had just been through so much pain to stand there. "All right," he said, "but if I tell you to back off, you'll listen." She nodded. A gust of wind blew through, making the stable door squeak slightly. Rhett moved toward it, each step sure and controlled. Amelia followed a few steps behind, close enough for him to hear her breathing, but not so close that she would impede him. As they approached the back gate, Rhett stopped. He bent down. In the snow were footprints, not his mark, not Amelia's mark, and not Lucille's. This footprint is bigger, deeper, and new. Rhett squeezed the gun tighter. Someone came around the back fence. Amelia put her hand to her mouth, trying not to cry out. Is that him? Not sure, Rhett replied, though his eyes said otherwise. Amelia stared at the footprints for a long time, her heart pounding like it was about to burst out of her chest. She didn't want to say it, but she had to. Caleb has a habit of walking around the place he wants to break into, like he's measuring the distance or looking for a weak spot. Rhett was silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, each word heavy as stone. Then he is doing just as you say. Amelia took a step back, putting her hands on the fence to keep from falling. You have to send me away. Now. Tonight. I will go far away. Run. Run until he can't find me anymore. Rhett spun around. No. Just one word, but strong enough to cut short her plans. You don't understand. She shook her head in despair. He won't give up. He'll follow me to the ends of the earth. He doesn't see me as human anymore. And you think I would let you go out alone with that evil thing lurking? Rhett asked, his voice low but strong. You think I let him drag you back because you were afraid I would be in danger? Amelia choked. I don't want anyone to pay for me. Rhett looked at her, his eyes piercing every defense she put up. You don't have the world on your shoulders. Not everyone is willing to abandon you. Amelia. He stepped closer, so close she could feel his warm breath in the cold air. How long have you lived in fear? Amelia bowed her head. More than a year. And all you've ever been taught, Rhett continued, is to run. But running will wear you out. Lawson Ridge is no place to run. This is a place to stand. The words took Amelia's breath away for a second. She felt her throat burn and tears well up in her eyes despite her efforts to hold them back. Rhett didn't touch her. He just stood there, close enough that she knew he wouldn't turn away, close enough that the darkness felt less scary. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out from the pine forest to the south, a loud cracking sound as if someone had stepped on a dry branch. Rhett reflexively stepped in front of Amelia. Come in, he commanded softly but firmly. Now, but come in. Amelia. She couldn't fight the voice. She ran into the house and stood by the window, looking out. Rhett walked deeper into the darkness, gun in hand, his figure disappearing behind the dark trees. No one said it, but both Amelia and Mrs. Lucille understood tonight was no ordinary night. Caleb Thorne was no longer a distant threat. He was close, very close. The fire in the fireplace flickered, its red glow reflecting off the old woodwork of the Lawson Ridge Ranch. Even as the flames burned brightly, Amelia Hart felt the chill in her bones. Not the cold of the snow or the wind, but the cold of fear sitting in the corner of the room, waiting to pounce and seize her. She stood by the window, her hands trembling as she touched the curtains. Outside, the darkness was a thick veil that swallowed all movement. In the dimness of the pines, she could see nothing but the vague shape of Rhett Lawson moving deeper into the darkness. He moved away, the small porch light illuminating his strong back and then swallowing it. Amelia held her breath, her hands clutching the doorframe as if that would keep him there. Little girl. Standing there won't make her any safer. Lucille's voice came from behind her, soft, but with the strength of someone who had been through more than anyone in this house. Amelia turned back, her eyes wet even though not a tear had fallen. Grandma, if it was for me. She choked. I don't want him to go that far. Mrs. Lucille stepped forward, placing her hand on her forehead as if comforting a child. There is a reason for that. Fear for someone is a sign that you trust people more than you think. Amelia pursed her lips. You shouldn't let anyone trust you too much. You'll bring trouble. The troublemaker, said Mrs. Lucille, is that man out there, not you. Amelia was silent. That sentence seemed to awaken a part of the truth that she had buried for a long time. The wind whistled loudly through the wooden walls, creating a sound like a distant howl. The house moved ever so slightly, as if exhaling in the cold. Amelia looked at the fireplace. I'm afraid of the dark. But I'm also afraid of the light, because the light makes it easier for people to see you and know where you are. Mrs. Lucille smiled gently. My daughter, no one can live their whole life hiding in the dark. Sometimes you have to stand in the light to know that you are worthy to live as a human being. A long moment passed. Amelia bowed her head, her hand falling back into her pocket, where the twisted ring still lay like a curse. Mrs. Lucille saw, that is his. Amelia nodded, her throat as bitter as ash. I fear he will come after whatever trace is left. Mrs. Lucille put her hand on her shoulder and squeezed gently. But you are at the Lawsons, and the Lawsons don't leave anyone alone. The front door suddenly slammed open with a loud bang. Amelia jumped back 2 steps, clutching her chest. Her heart was pounding. Every sense screamed that he was standing somewhere in the darkness, just a few feet away. But it was just the wind. Or was she reassuring herself Amelia wasn't sure? Mrs. Lucille checked the latch and said, The door's still locked. It's just too windy. Amelia swallowed. But as soon as she finished speaking, there was another sound. Not wind, not trees, but very light footsteps. Footsteps that touched the wooden steps and disappeared. She froze in place. You hear Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Lucille listened for a few seconds and then nodded. Yes, but don't assume the worst right away. In this part of the West, not everyone who passes by your house at night is a bad person. Amelia smiled bitterly. But he always comes at night, always chooses when I'm most afraid to come out. Mrs. Lucille was about to say more when the back door opened softly, without a sound of wind. It was Rhett. His figure was visible in the kitchen light, his breath coming out in white puffs from the cold. His coat and shoulders were caked with snow, but he showed no signs of fatigue or agitation. Amelia ran to his side, but then stopped halfway, afraid she was too impatient. Are you seeing anyone?" she asked, her voice cracking with tension. Rhett took off his gloves and put the gun down on the table. No, only new footprints to the south. But he was gone before I got there. Amelia flinched as if someone had just thrown a bucket of cold water on her. So he's really here. Rhett stepped closer to her, his eyes filled with a determination she had never seen in anyone else. He won't get in this house. Amelia, I promise. She shook her head. He goes wherever I breathe. He always does. Rhett put his hands on the edge of the table, his voice as deep as the rumbling earth. If he wanted you, he would have found you. But to get in here, he had to get through me. Amelia looked at him for a long moment, not with fear, but with faith. Faith that for the first time in months, she wouldn't have to run. Rhett turned to Mrs. Lucille. Keep the doors closed all day. Don't leave any windows cracked, especially the back door. I'll check the fence tomorrow morning. Mrs. Lucille nodded. Don't worry. This family can protect itself. Rhett turned back to Amelia. Go up to your room and rest. I'll sleep downstairs tonight. If he comes, I'll be the first to hear him. No, Amelia said softly, taking a step back. You shouldn't lose sleep over me. Not because of you, Rhett replied, his voice calm, but his eyes revealing the truth. Because this is my home. She choked. He won't let go. Not even if you stand in front of the door?" Rhett looked deep into her eyes, then said something she didn't expect. "I've lived through losses I thought I couldn't recover from. If anyone dares to come into my house and take someone in need, they will pay," Amelia cried. Not loudly, not screaming, just silent tears, like rain falling on the dry western soil. "Mrs. Lucille pulled Amelia close, holding her like a frightened child. "You're safe, my dear. This house won't let you wander alone again." Amelia squeezed her hand lightly, then looked over at Rhett, the man standing under the oil lamp, looking like a mountain in the dark night. Then a light knock sounded on the door, not loud, not urgent, but too clear to be wind. Rhett turned, his eyes sharp as knives. "Go into your room," he said, without turning around. Amelia held her breath. The second knock came, very slow, very calm, as if the person outside wanted them to know he was in no hurry. He had all night, and he knew for sure they were in the house. The third knock sounded, slow and steady, like a hammer to the heart. In the dead silence of the cabin, the sound was so loud that Amelia Hart clenched her hands in her lap, her whole body stiffening. "Mrs." Lucille looked at her for a moment, then gently pushed her into the upstairs hallway, whispering in a voice that brooked no argument, "Go to your room. Now." But Amelia was glued to the floor. "Grandma, what if it was him? What if he—" "That's why I have to go," Rhett Lawson, still staring at the front door, said in a low to restrained voice. "Go. Amelia, I'll handle it." She wanted to say no, wanted to say that she could not leave him in the danger she herself brought. But when she saw the gun in his hand, slightly raised, his eyes so sharp that they seemed to pierce through the wood, she knew that standing there would only be more trouble for her. Amelia held back her tears and turned to run up the stairs. After a few steps, she stopped and looked back. Rhett didn't turn. He stood as still as stone in a blizzard, but his shoulders were tense, every muscle ready for the worst. Amelia put her hand to her chest, trying to keep her heart from racing. Then she disappeared upstairs. "Mrs." Lucille retreated to the kitchen and took from a drawer an old but clean revolver. "Rhett," she said softly, "I won't answer the door. I know." A fourth knock sounded, this time louder, as if the person outside was growing impatient. Rhett stepped closer to the door, not quite close, but keeping a safe distance. "Who is it?" His voice rang out, not trembling, not afraid, just wary. Only the wind answered. He tightened his grip on the gun, then asked again, "Louder, I say. Who is it?" Still silent. Rhett tilted his head, listening for the slightest sound. No footsteps, no voices, no horses. But there was something else, very soft, very long, like a breath being held outside the door. Only someone who wants to hide their presence breathes like that. He glanced toward the wall. "Lucille, turn off the light." "Mrs." Lucille immediately turned off the kitchen light. The only light now was the fire in the fireplace, casting a tiger-orange glow on the front door. Rhett walked to the next window, tucked himself into a corner. He pulled the curtain back a crack. Outside, there was no one to be seen, only the wind blowing through the snow, creating white streaks flying across. But he knew. The feeling of someone who had lived his whole life on this earth could not be wrong. Someone was standing just outside the darkness. Looking in, Rhett placed the gun at his hip, ducking his head slightly to avoid the view through the glass. "Lucille, you move back inside. I won't leave you alone." "Rhett." Rhett did not reply, but when he turned, his eyes thanked her for her steadfastness. The fifth knock came, louder than before. A deadly silence followed. Then a deep, hoarse voice sounded from outside, like wood scraping against metal. "I got lost." Amelia, standing by the stairs upstairs, clutched the edge of the wall until she turned white. That voice. She recognized every beat, every pitch, every breath. Caleb Thorne. She covered her mouth, trying not to cry out. "Don't let strangers in at night," said Rhett. "Go on." The voice outside the door rang out again, closer this time, as if he had leaned close to the crack. "I just want some water. It's so cold." "There is no water," Rhett replied quietly. A small laugh rang out. Not long, not happy. A laugh like a knife. "I don't think there's ever a shortage of water in the Lawson house," said Caleb. Rhett froze. He knew his name. "He knows," Amelia muttered, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Downstairs." Rhett stood, his entire body shifting from defense to combat. "Who are you? Caleb's voice suddenly became lower, colder. "I'm someone who is looking for something that belongs to me." Rhett tightened his grip on the gun. "There is nothing here that belongs to you." There was only a sigh in response, a sarcastic sigh. "Are you sure? A little girl, brown hair, scared eyes, ran away from me about a year ago." Amelia covered her mouth tightly, tears welling up below. Rhett felt the air freeze. "You leave now," Rhett said clearly, "or you won't walk out of this farm in one piece." Caleb chuckled. "You think I came here alone?" Rhett paused for half a second, long enough to understand that things were more serious than he had thought. "What do you want?" Rhett asked. "I want her," Caleb replied, his voice as light as someone ordering an item. A heavy silence fell over the house. Upstairs, Amelia slid down the wall, holding her head, trying not to let the fear consume her. "No, no, I won't go with him." Her voice was hoarse from holding back tears. In the room below, Rhett was eerily calm. "She's not yours anymore." "Never," Caleb said. "Everything that belongs to me must always come back to me." Then he knocked lightly on the door again, as if to say goodbye. "I'll come back. When you fall asleep from exhaustion, when the kitchen lights go out, when she's no longer standing next to you, I'll come, without waiting for an answer." He stepped back, silently, very silently. Rhett pressed against the door, listening. The footsteps did go away, farther away, then gone. He stood still for a long time, as if afraid it was just a trap he had set. Then he relaxed his shoulders and exhaled slowly. Lucille stepped to his side. "Son, this is just the beginning." "I know," Rhett said, his eyes turning into the deep darkness. "But he won't take her. Not while I'm breathing. Upstairs." Amelia sat huddled, her hands shaking over her face. But beneath her fear, something else was growing faith. Faith in the man who had stood between her and the darkness. It was nearly dawn, but the Lawson Ridge ranch house was still shrouded in total darkness. No one slept. No one dared sleep. Not after Caleb Thorne had knocked on the door in a menacing voice, leaving behind the chilling promise that he would return when everyone was least looking. Rhett Lawson sat at the kitchen table, the gun within reach, breathing evenly but eyes open. The fire burned brightly, the firelight reflecting off his stern face. He had the quiet air of a man preparing for the worst. Mrs. Lucille sat on the wooden chair opposite, a woolen scarf covering her shoulders. Her deep eyes seemed to understand better than anyone the danger that was approaching. And Amelia Hart. She stood on the stairs for a long time, her hands gripping the banister, hesitating between staying in her room for safety or going down to face it. Fear gripped her, but something else pushed her gently toward the firelight. She walked slowly down the steps, her breath shaky but her eyes determined. Rhett looked up at the sound of footsteps. "You should rest." Amelia shook her head. "I can't. Mrs. Lucille pulled a chair closer. "Come sit here, dear." Amelia walked over, but instead of sitting down immediately, she stood still for a few seconds, as if mustering the courage to speak. "You have to tell the truth. You have to tell everything. Otherwise, everyone will be in danger." Rhett looked straight at her. "We have some idea, but I want to hear it from you." Amelia took a deep breath and sat down. The fire cast a red glow over her face, as if to contain the pain that was threatening to overflow. "Caleb Thorne didn't start out as a bad person," Amelia said, her voice soft but steady. "At least, not to me. When my parents died, he came as a benefactor. He picked me up from the rubble. He told me I was special, that I was chosen. Mrs. Lucille frowned, and Rhett remained motionless as a log, but his eyes never left Amelia. "But the good things only lasted a few months," Amelia continued. "Then he started to change, controlling, jealous for no reason, not letting me interact with the neighbors, not letting me go to the market alone. He said it was love." She laughed very softly, a laugh that broke like falling glass. "I was so stupid back then. I thought love could hurt like that." Rhett tightened his grip on the gun. "And the ring," Amelia nodded slightly. "He forced me to wear it. Said it was a sign of possession. I didn't want it. I refused. And that was the first time he hit me." Her voice broke a little, but she continued. "I ran the first time. He caught me. He beat me harder. The second time, he locked the door, crushed everything I had. The third time, I ran into a wagon going to Wyoming." Amelia clenched her fists, "and I never came back." Silence fell over the room like a thick layer of dust. Only the crackling of the fire in the fireplace could be heard. "Has he ever been in trouble with the law?" Rhett asked. "He bribed them," Amelia replied, looking down. "They were afraid of him, afraid of touching the Thorne family." Rhett stood up and took a few steps to the window, looking out into the darkness outside. He leaned his hands on the wooden frame, his back slightly bent as if carrying an invisible weight. "Why didn't you tell me when you got here?" His voice was not blaming, only hurt. Amelia bowed her head, her hands wringing together. "Because I thought. I just had to keep running. I didn't want anyone involved. I didn't want anyone to risk their lives for me." Rhett turned, his eyes flashing with anger, but not at her. "Do you think you can run forever?" "I don't know." Amelia's chest tightened. "I just know if I stop, he'll catch me. Mrs. Lucille stood up and put her hand on her shoulder. "My dear, no one should live like that. No one is born to be prey for others." Amelia looked up, her eyes filled with tears, but the firelight made them seem warmer. "But I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me." Rhett walked over to her and sat down in the chair opposite. He rested both elbows on his knees and leaned forward. "Amelia," he said, his voice deep but sharp as a knife, "people don't choose who they save. They save because it's the right thing to do." She was silent. Rhett continued. "You said he changed after a few months? You know who that reminds me of?" Amelia shook her head slightly. "Myself," he said, his eyes fixed on the fire, his voice like wind cutting through dry hills. "I used to think I was a good man, kind. But after my wife died, I sank into drink, into anger. I hurt the very people who wanted to help me. And one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself." Amelia was surprised, never having heard him talk about his pain. "Unlike him," Rhett continued, "I chose to change for the better. Caleb, he chose to turn himself into a demon." The room fell into a different kind of silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of truth being spoken. "Amelia," Rhett looked her straight in the eye, "from now on, you will not face him alone." She couldn't hold back her tears. "But what if he hurts you?" "Well, I will," Rhett replied casually, "because people like him, if not stopped, will continue to ruin other people's lives. And I've let too many things slip through my fingers at once, Amelia cried. But this time it wasn't despair. It felt like relief, like the door to her heart had finally opened a crack to let light in. You have lived in the dark too long, Amelia, said Mrs. Lucille, her voice as soft as a touch to a trembling child. It is time someone lit a lamp for you. Amelia let out a breath, each breath ragged but softer than before. She looked up at Rhett, and for the first time, she saw true peace in his eyes. Not the peace of someone who knew no fear, but the peace of someone who had fought and risen after all that was lost. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how many times I wanted to give up, but now I'm starting to want to live again. Rhett nodded slightly, a very small nod but enough for Amelia to feel warmth spread in her chest. Just then, a long howl came from the distance of the forest. It was not a wolf. It was not the wind. It was the whistle, the long, familiar whistle that Caleb used whenever he wanted to call someone out while he was waiting. Amelia stiffened. He came back. Rhett stood up, gun in hand. No, he won't be back that soon. But his eyes said something else. He hadn't gone as far as they thought. Mrs. Lucille squeezed Amelia's hand. We'll fight it together. All three. Amelia took a deep breath and wiped away her tears. Tonight, I won't run away. Rhett looked at her, and in his eyes, there was real respect. Little did they know that in the darkness outside, a shadow was leaning against a large tree trunk, looking towards the house with a half smile. He hadn't left. He had never intended to leave, and he'd heard enough to know that Amelia Hart no longer feared him. Dawn at Lawson Ridge came slowly, like an old man struggling to rise after a long night. The first light that shone over the snow-capped hills was not as bright as usual, but pale and bitterly cold. The cabin was bathed in that cold light, signaling a new day that was not peaceful. Amelia Hart sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea that Lucille had made that morning. Her eyes were still swollen from the sleepless night, but there was a determination in those eyes that she had never seen before. Rhett Lawson stood by the window, his hands on the wooden frame, watching the southern hills where the whistling had sounded last night. His eyes were slightly dark, but his gaze was as sharp as a knife. The way he stood told Amelia that he was ready for whatever might happen today. Mrs. Lucille placed another bowl of hot soup in front of Amelia. You must eat. We need our strength, Rhett asked bluntly. Are you sure it was Caleb? Amelia looked up at him, her voice low but firm. I can't forget that voice. Rhett, even in the deepest darkness. I know it. Rhett nodded very slightly, as a signal to himself that the situation was clear and there was no longer any doubt. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from Amelia. There is something you must know. Amelia was worried. What Rhett said, a small stack of letters on the table, old envelopes, their edges frayed from repeated opening. The mail was from the Red Creek post office. It was addressed to A.H., but no one claimed it until you got here. Amelia hesitantly opened an envelope. Inside was just a small piece of paper. I know you're hiding. You won't be able to hide for long. See? The whole kitchen became heavy as if the air had frozen. Amelia trembled. He sent it all the way to the post office. Yes, said Rhett, and have been sending it regularly for 3 months. She crumpled the paper. I don't know. You don't need to know everything, Rhett said softly, but with authority. From now on, the responsibility is mine. A moment of silence passed as the whole room held its breath. Mrs. Lucille lost patience with the thick atmosphere. Rhett, we can't just sit and wait. We have to call the police. I did, Rhett said. But the Red Creek Police Department has 3 men, and I know exactly what they'll do if they hear the name Caleb Thorne. Amelia knew that better than anyone. He was rich. He had connections. He knew how to make mistakes disappear. "So what do we do now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Rhett looked her straight in the eye. "We'll let him reveal himself." Amelia blinked. "What do you mean?" Rhett stood up and pointed to the window. "I know he's around. He wants you out, so he can grab you in the dark. But he won't come in broad daylight. He's not stupid. He'll be watching, waiting for you to go somewhere alone." Amelia shivered. "And you plan to use me as bait?" "No," Rhett said immediately, his eyes blazing with deep seriousness. "I will go with you. Every step. Not a yard off you." "I don't like this plan, Mrs. Lucille interjected. "I don't like it at all." "But that was the only plan he didn't guess," said Rhett. Amelia was silent. A terrible fear burned inside her, but behind it was another fire: faith. She looked at Rhett, the man of few words. His eyes, always kept a distance, now stood between life and death for her, and she realized this man was not only strong in his hands, but also in his heart, once broken, but still big enough to protect a stranger. Amelia sighed. "If this is the only way, I trust you." Rhett touched the brim of his hat hanging on the chair and asked, "Can you ride a horse?" Amelia was a little startled. "Yes, a little. My father taught me when I was little." "Good. We'll ride out into the eastern woods. He's used to stalking in the dark, but he's not used to dealing with cowboys from the west as guides." His voice was calm, but his eyes told Amelia he had lived his whole life on this land. No predator knew the roots of a tree like he did. She nodded. "I'm ready." Lucille shook her head, but she knew she couldn't stop them. "I'll have food ready for you both, and hot soup when you get back. But listen." She put her hand on Amelia's cheek. "Don't let fear dictate your actions anymore." Amelia smiled slightly, her eyes shining with new courage. "I won't let fear win again." Rhett pulled on his coat, checked his gun, and headed for the door. "Let's go. The sooner the better." Amelia followed, stepping out into the yard where the pale early morning light spread evenly over the hill. 2 horses had been prepared by Rhett early the jet-black midnight for him and the tan Sandy for her. Amelia stroked Sandy's mane, feeling strangely at peace. Rhett put his foot on the saddle first, then turned to look at her, ready. She nodded and climbed into the saddle. "Okay." They rode slowly toward the eastern forest. The morning air was cold as a knife, making every sound clearer. Beneath the tall pines, Amelia felt her heartbeat match the sound of the horses' hooves. The snow fell in small clumps underfoot, melting with the rhythm of Sandy's pedaling. After a while, Rhett said, his voice low so only Amelia could hear, "He will follow from a distance. Don't look back. Don't react. Let me watch." Amelia tightened her grip on the reins. "Did you see him?" "I saw the mark," said Rhett. "And when the wind changed, I could smell his cigarettes." Amelia shivered. "But he dares not come near," Rhett continued. "We are leading him into land he does not know well." She thought to herself, Rhett isn't just protecting me. He's luring him into the light to end it all. But suddenly, Rhett pulled on the reins, signaling a stop. "Amelia," he said, his voice low. "There's something you need to know before this goes any further." Amelia tensed. What Rhett looked straight into her eyes, the deep, sad eyes of a man who had lost his world. "I didn't protect you out of duty, not out of kindness or because you were weak." Amelia held her breath. "I did it because I care about you." He spoke slowly, as if afraid she wouldn't understand. "And because I want you here at Lawson Ridge, not because you're afraid, but because you choose to stay." Amelia's heart clenched, as if held by a gentle but firm hand. Taking the reins, she said in a low but heartfelt voice, "Mr. Rhett." But before she could finish, the sound of a dry branch breaking was heard so close, as if someone had just stepped down right behind them. Amelia jumped. Rhett spun, gun drawn in an instant. From the shadows of the forest, a tall shadow stepped out, slowly, as if he had been there for a long time. Caleb Thorne. He finally showed his face. Caleb Thorne stepped out of the shadows as if he were strolling through his own yard. His long charcoal cloak billowed in the wind, and his cold gray eyes were fixed on Amelia like an old wolf rediscovering prey that had escaped all winter. The space seemed to be suffocated. No more wind, no more horse hooves, just three people, and the tight rope between life, death, flight, confrontation. Amelia stiffened in the saddle, her hands cold. She felt as if years of pain were coming back to her. Each bruise, each scream, each threat seemed to pierce the cold air of the pine forest. Rhett Lawson immediately stood between her and Caleb, his right hand holding the gun, his left hand slightly behind him signaling her to keep her distance. Caleb walked slowly, his voice like metal scraping against stone. "Amelia, you kept me looking for you for a year. You're more stubborn than I thought," Amelia wanted to reply, but her throat felt like it was constricted. Only her rapid breathing showed that she was still alive. "Stop," Rhett said, his voice low and authoritative. "One more step, and you could be dead." Caleb's lips curled into a smile of someone who believed he couldn't be intimidated. Rhett Lawson. The rancher was known for being fair, quiet, and a quiet man. I knew him. I knew his family. I knew the land. He took another half step forward, deliberately provoking, but it seems that since Amelia arrived, Lawson Ridge has not been peaceful anymore. Rhett didn't blink. "You touch her again, you won't get the last word." Caleb looked at Amelia, not sparing Rhett another glance. "What did you run here for? Do you think this tall old man can protect you? Or do you think you deserve to live in peace in that warm wooden house?" Amelia trembled, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was anger, because he still saw her as his possession, as a commodity he could reclaim. Caleb continued, his voice sickly sweet. "You will always be mine. Amelia, you know that." Rhett sprang from the saddle like a bolt of lightning. "She belongs to no one." Caleb laughed loudly, echoing through the forest. "Belonged to no one. You think your words will do. What do you know about her? That she was so afraid of the dark that she trembled at night, that she wouldn't sleep without my ring on her finger?" Amelia sobbed, her heart aching as if stabbed. He had brought up the most horrifying memory of her life. He knew how to break her with just a few words. Rhett saw Amelia's body tremble violently, and took a step back toward her without taking his eyes off Caleb. Caleb tilted his head, like a wild animal smelling fear. Did he know? "Rhett, that you begged me to stay one last time. That you—" Enough, Rhett's voice boomed so loudly that the birds in the pine trees scattered. Caleb's smile dropped, his eyes sharp. "You're in the middle of my business. You'll regret it." Rhett took a step forward, the gun aimed straight at Caleb's forehead. "I've had enough regrets in my life. Not again. Not by you." The atmosphere was explosive. Caleb snorted, looking contemptuous. "You think shooting me will solve this? Amelia will come back to me whether you live or die. It was meant to be." The two words fate woke Amelia up. It was as if someone had just awakened the human part of her that he had imprisoned for a whole year. She gripped the reins tightly, took a deep breath, and said, her voice still trembling, but filled with a fire she didn't know she had Caleb. "Fate is not something you decide." Caleb stopped. Surprise flashed in his eyes. "What did you just say?" Amelia swallowed her fear and continued. "You didn't save me. You captured me. You don't love me. You own me. You want me to fear you so I never leave." Caleb's face darkened. "Amelia, think again. You're making yourself miserable." No, she interrupted, her voice hard. You hurt me, and I won't let you touch me. Again. Caleb sneered. You think he can protect you? He doesn't understand you. Amelia, I do. I know what you're afraid of. I know where you're weak. I know how to make you beg. Amelia shouted out the last of the courage she had accumulated over the months. You don't know anything about me anymore. Rhett immediately shielded himself from her, ready to shoot if Caleb got an inch closer. Caleb's eyes darkened like a storm. You're choosing someone else over me. Amelia replied immediately. I choose myself. Rhett glanced at her, and for the first time since they'd met, his eyes were filled with pride. Caleb narrowed his eyes. He exhaled, a heavy, cruel breath. Then, we have nothing more to say. He drew a gun from his side, a movement so quick it was barely visible to the naked eye. Rhett shouted, Amelia, bend down. Amelia bowed reflexively. The gunshots rang out loudly in the cold pine forest. Sandy startled and whinnied. Midnight backed away. The birds flew away. Rhett lunged in front of Amelia, but Caleb aimed right at her evasive path. Already! A loud bang came from the other direction. Not the sound of a bullet piercing a person. It was the sound of a bullet hitting something metal. Rhett turned his head. Amelia turned her head too. The bullet ricocheted off the iron buckle on the saddle that Rhett had added that morning, as if he had expected something. Caleb looked at the scene, his eyes flashing with madness. Impossible! Rhett roared, lunging forward, gun aimed at Caleb. If you want to kill someone, you'll have to get through me first. Caleb stepped back, gasping, but his smile returned the smile of someone who knew something they didn't. Rhett Lawson, he said through gritted teeth, you think I came here alone. A cold wind blew, making Amelia shiver. Rhett stood still for half a second. Just half a second, but enough to completely change the atmosphere. Another set of footsteps sounded behind them. Not Caleb's, someone else's. A second person was standing in the woods, silent, hidden, and it seemed it was surrounding them from the other side. The second footstep sounded like a twig snapping in a winter forest, clear, decisive, and enough to make Amelia Hart feel her blood run cold. The space around them suddenly became too large, too dark, and too silent, as if the whole forest held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Rhett Lawson instinctively backed away from Amelia, half his body shielding her, his hands gripping the gun so tightly his knuckles turned white. Midnight jumped up, jerked the reins, and felt the murderous aura filling the air. Rhett didn't turn his head, just whispered, Amelia, don't look away. Just hold on to the saddle. But even as he said that, Amelia still looked back unconsciously, and that shadow stepped out, a tall man in a dark brown coat, his face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. As he approached, the dim morning light fell on his bony face and eyes as black as wet pebbles. He wasn't like Caleb. No hysteria, no sneer. He just stood there, watching them with calm eyes, as if he were watching a herd of cattle on a hill. A kind of calm that was more frightening than Caleb's madness. Caleb Thorne stepped aside, extending his hand as if this were a formal meeting. Allow me to introduce Jonah Pike. Jonah gently touched the brim of his hat. Nice to meet you both. His voice was deep and calm, to the point of being frightening. Amelia couldn't breathe. This Jonah? She had heard of him. Whenever Caleb went away, he always left a threat. If you don't make it back, Jonah will take care of it. She thought it was just a threat to keep her obedient, but no Jonah existed, and he was standing before her, in the flesh. Who is he? Rhett asked, his voice serious. Caleb chuckled. Someone you don't want to mess with. Jonah took another step. Not quickly, not threateningly, but every step he took was like stepping on Amelia's nerves. Caleb, Jonah said, his voice light as air, I came to take her home. No need to say more." "Good," Caleb replied, glancing at Rhett and then at Amelia. "We'll get this over with." But Rhett wouldn't let them go any further. He raised the gun straight to Jonah's eye. "Both of you stand still." Jonah did stop just for a beat. He looked at the gun in Rhett's hand like a fly on his coat. "Mr. Lawson," Jonah said, his voice chillingly polite, "if you knew anything about Caleb, you would know that no one wins against him." Rhett answered immediately, his voice unshaken. "I don't need to win. I just need to protect her." Amelia gripped the saddle tightly, her chest aching. She knew Caleb was dangerous, but Caleb pulsed Jonah. She didn't dare imagine. Caleb slowly turned to look at Amelia. "You're coming with me. There's no other choice. Jonah only intervenes when I see you doing something stupid." Amelia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, then opened them with a different look, the look of someone who had had enough. "I will not go with you." Her voice was soft, but sharp as frost. Caleb frowned. "Amelia." "No," she insisted. "I choose freedom." Caleb's face twitched. Jonah just tilted his head, as if analyzing the reaction of a wild animal. Rhett stood his ground, unblinking. "You heard me. Now get off my land." Caleb's smile was no longer normal. "You think you won. You fool. You think I only want Amelia." He stepped forward, his feet making a crunching sound on the snow. "I wanted to break her. When she loved me, I wanted to keep her. But when she betrayed me—" He raised his hand and pointed at Amelia. "I wanted to break her." Amelia tightened her grip on the reins, her eyes red with fear and anger. Jonah whispered, "Caleb, don't be long-winded." Caleb turned to his friend. "I'm going to end this." He pulled out a gun. Rhett had already aimed. "Frozen space." Amelia shouted, "Stop!" But the two guns did not stop. Rhett pulled the trigger first. Bullets whistled through the cold air. Caleb ducked, but the bullet grazed his shoulder. Blood soaked his jacket. At that same moment, Jonah rushed in like a leopard. "Rhett, watch out!" Amelia shouted. Rhett spun away from the blow, but Jonah was so fast his shadow was almost a blur. There was a clang of metal as Jonah swung a gleaming dagger. Rhett raised his hand to parry, but the tip still missed his coat. Amelia panicked. The sight before her eyes felt like her heart was being squeezed. Caleb shouted, "Jonah, hold him, I'll take her." He lunged at Amelia, his maniacal grin more evident than ever. Amelia pulled hard on the reins, and Sandy reared up, kicking the air. Caleb reached for her leg, but Amelia threw a handful of broken snow at his face with all her might. Caleb backed away, cursing. Amelia shouted, her voice filled with despair and courage, "Mr. Rhett, don't let them take me." Rhett was struggling with Jonah, but still shouted back Amelia, "Ride." But she couldn't. If she ran, Rhett would die. She knew for sure. Another gunshot rang out. Not from Rhett, not from Caleb. "It's Jonah's." The bullet hit the tree trunk right next to Rhett's head. "Splinters flying like dust." Caleb shouted, "Jonah, kill him." Jonah didn't answer. He ghosted toward Rhett, knife gleaming in the dim light. Rhett swung the gun, but Jonah was faster. Everything happens in half a second. Jonah slashed down, Rhett retreated. Caleb ran towards Amelia. Amelia was about to jump off the saddle. The sound of horse hooves trampling the snow echoed in the distance. A loud shout came from the forest. "Stop!" Another figure appeared, one on horseback, wearing a U.S. Marshal's long coat. A gold badge gleamed on his chest. Amelia gasped. Rhett was also stunned. Caleb swore. Jonah turned around. The newcomer raised his gun, his voice booming. "Jonah Pike, Caleb Thorne, you are both federally wanted." Amelia held her breath. Caleb yelled, "Are you following me?" "Levi Marshall." Levi Granger's face was cold. I've been following you for a year. Caleb. Rhett bent over Amelia, but this time someone else stood between them and the darkness. What Amelia had been desperately searching for had finally arrived. The winter forest fell into a stifling silence as Marshal Levi Granger appeared. The snow reflected off the gold badge on his chest, making it glow in the cold. His horse pulled up before the other three, his breath coming out in thick puffs. No one moved. No one dared to breathe loudly. Caleb Thorne looked at Levi like he was seeing a demon in human form. Levi, you have no right to interfere in this, Marshal Granger replied calmly, his sharp eyes scanning each of them. I have every right to. You are wanted in 3 states, and so is Jonah Pike. Jonah tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. You finally caught up with us. No, Levi replied. You offered yourselves before me. Amelia Hart sat on Sandy's back, her hands still shaking in their gloves. She had never known Caleb to be afraid of anyone, but the way he looked at Levi told her this was more than a personal vendetta. Caleb and Jonah were more than abusers. They had a history of crimes deeper than she had ever known. Rhett Lawson kept Amelia close behind him, his eyes never leaving the 2 men in front of him. Levi, he said softly, be careful. Jonah is faster than you think. I know, Marshal Granger replied without letting down his guard. Caleb kicked up a fuss. I'm not going back. Not until I get back what's mine. Amelia heard that, and a part of her chest felt like it was breaking. She screamed, I never belonged to you. Caleb. Never. Caleb turned his head to look at her, his eyes full of anger and despair. We made a promise. Amelia, have you forgotten so quickly? She shook her head. That's not a promise. That's a compulsion. The air seemed to cut. Rhett sensed Amelia trembling and reached back to touch her leg gently to reassure her. By doing so, he not only protected her, but also reminded her that she was no longer alone. Levi spoke softly. Caleb Thorne, Jonah Pike, lower your weapons. Jonah chuckled. What if we don't? Then I will shoot, Levi said as if it were a matter of course. Caleb gritted his teeth. Levi, step aside. This is private, no. Levi interrupted. This is a matter of justice. Caleb lost control. He raised his gun at Rhett. Then your justice will see me get her back, Amelia shouted. Rhett, watch out. In the blink of an eye, 3 actions happened at the same time. Caleb pulled the trigger. Rhett turned to cover Amelia. Levi fired first. Bullets ripped through the forest. Midnight stood up. Sandy panicked. Amelia hugged Rhett, feeling like a life was ending right there. Caleb was thrown back, the gun falling from his hand. He fell to his knees in the snow. Blood spread in a long streak. Jonah roared instinctively and lunged at Levi, but Levi was waiting. A powerful kick from him sent Jonah rolling to the ground. The knife in his hand flew away and stuck in a nearby tree trunk. Jonah started to get up, but Rhett aimed the gun at him. Don't move. For the first time, Jonah stopped. He looked at Rhett and Levi, his breath coming out in sharp gas. No longer arrogant, no longer calm. Just a man who knew he had lost. Caleb struggled to his feet, blood running down his shoulder and chest. But he still squinted at Amelia. You think he's better than me. Amelia dismounted, her legs weak, but she continued forward not out of pity, but because she needed to face her own past. She stood just a few feet away from Caleb, not because anyone was better than anyone else, but because I chose to stand up, to walk away from you, to be free. Caleb shook his head wildly. You owe me. I gave you everything, Amelia interrupted, her voice soft but strong. You have never given me anything but fear. Caleb opened his mouth, but could speak no more. The strength went from him like the wind off a hilltop. Levi tied Jonah's hands, then bent down and turned Caleb over, handcuffing him. Caleb Thorne, you are under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, firearms trafficking, and malicious wounding. And that's not all. Caleb laughed, a weak, blood-tinged laugh. You don't know. There's more to it. But he could not continue. Levi stood up. Rhett, Amelia, this won't be over soon, but you're safe. Rhett put his hand on Levi's shoulder. Thank you. You came just in time. Levi sighed. Thanks to the Red Creek post office, I tracked the mail to Amelia Hart. When I recognized the handwriting as Caleb's, I knew he was getting close. Amelia felt her legs give way. Rhett caught her, pulling her against him. Levi looked at the two of them for a moment, then said softly, Mr. Lawson, I think you understand what she needs most right now. Rhett nodded. I know. Levi took Jonah and Caleb away, the sound of hooves fading into the valley. Peace began to return, but slowly, as if carefully examining whether the land was truly safe. Amelia leaned against Rhett, her breath still shaking slightly. Mr. Rhett. Rhett put his hand on her back, his voice soft. It's okay. The grudge is over. I'm here. Amelia buried her face in his shoulder, hot tears soaking into his thick coat. They were no longer tears of fear. They were tears of someone who had just escaped a year of chains. I thought you would die because of me. She choked. Rhett raised his hand to her cheek, his voice warm and firm. Nothing will make me leave you. Not today. Not ever. Amelia looked up at him, her eyes red but shining with a deep, dark light. I have to answer you this. When you said you wanted me to stay at Lawson Ridge, did you mean it? Rhett looked at her a long time. Not in a hurry, not letting the wind take away what he had to say. Amelia, I want you to stay not because I need someone to fill a void, but because you came into my life as a light, and I want to protect that light. Two people stood in the middle of a pine forest, the snow falling lightly, so peaceful it seemed as if heaven and earth were listening. Amelia put her hand on his chest. I want to stay, not because I'm scared, not because anyone is holding me back, but because this is where I feel like I can be myself. Rhett didn't hug her right away. He just placed his hand over hers on his shirt, squeezing it gently in a gentle promise. Then, from now on, let's start over, step by step, at your pace. Amelia smiled the first smile without the darkness. Step by step, in rhythm with both of us. Peace for the first time is no longer a luxury. It was right there, between the two of them, in the middle of the western pine forest, changing colors into spring. The story of Amelia and Rhett is more than just a journey out of danger. It is a reminder that the deepest wounds in life are sometimes not on the skin, but in the fears we carry with us every day. But those same wounds can become the starting point of a rebirth. If we find the courage to step out of the darkness and open ourselves to the new light. By the time we reach our 60s, we've probably all experienced loss, hurt, or a sense of being stuck in some stage of our lives. But this story tells us it's never too late to start over, to give yourself a chance at peace, love, and being yourself gently, slowly, but hopefully. Thank you for accompanying the story. If you find it meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to bring stories that touch the heart.